So we now come to planting your tree, and this is without any doubt the most critical part of the whole operation. So the first thing we do is to dig a hole considerably bigger than the root system. This tree happens to be in a pot, but basically the same principles apply whether it's a bare root tree or a potted tree. So we start off digging a hole roughly the depth of the spade. So we've now dug the hole and loosened up the bottom, because the really critical thing is that the soil is nice and open with plenty of air, so that when you planted the tree, the roots can grow down and out and into the surrounding soil. So what we're now going to do is to add some compost, and the heavier or lighter the soil, the more compost you need to add, and we're not going to stint here. So for this tree I'm going to use at least half this bag of compost and maybe a bit more. So the first lot goes in the bottom of the hole, and we then mix that up, and you'll be surprised, it doesn't take very much mixing before you'd hardly think you'd put any compost in there. It just disappears. Right, we're then going to put some more compost onto the soil that we're going to be backfilling with. And we'll just mix that in a bit. Most of the compost that you buy from your local centre won't have any feed in. This hasn't got any feed in at all, no fertiliser. There's no problem with that at all. The trees in the first year, while they're establishing, don't need a great deal of fertiliser. They just need to get their roots down. So that's the hole prepared. We now take the tree and pop it in the hole, and as you can see, that's probably a little bit too low, because we want to end up with the surface of the compost about level with the surrounding soil. So we just put in a bit more of our mixed, like that. Pop the tree in again. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay, this is one of the big advantages of the eco pot. You can remove the bag with absolutely minimal root disturbance. Just cut the bag, take it down to the bottom, pull it out, and there we are. Right, now if, when you take it off, you think that there is any danger, this is obviously a well-established root system, if there's any indication that the roots are circling, then all you need to do is to make a few vertical cuts, only about 1/4 of an inch deep, about 6 of them, round the root ball, just to sever any circling roots so that they will then grow outwards. Because what's important is that once the tree is established, we'll get rid of the cane since it's fallen off anyway, the roots need to grow outwards in all directions. You want a radial root system, and that will ensure that the tree is stable in the ground. If you don't have that, and you have if the roots are circled and then break off, then what you basically end up with underneath the tree is a giant spring, and at some stage in the future, decent wind is just going to blow the thing over. Right, we now fill in with the compost and soil mix around the root ball. About like that. Make sure it's upright. Tread firmly all the way round. And if it's, yeah, I think that's maybe not quite upright, pull it over a bit, tread on that side, there we are. And then earth up again, by putting in the rest of the soil you took out. So it'll end up slightly higher. Now, depending what time of the year you're planting, if the weather's already pretty dry, then it's absolutely critical that you get enough water into the root ball and the surrounding soil initially. And I've just remembered what we didn't bring with us, which is a bucket of water or a watering can. So now we come to the watering, and it is absolutely critical at any time of the year that you thoroughly water in any newly planted tree. So what I'm going to do is to dish the area around the trunk, just make a bit of a ring here, so that when I then pour in the water, it doesn't all just run off down the garden, or in this case the field. And there we are. Won't quite take it all in one go without bursting through. Now this is absolutely critical to settle the soil tightly around the roots, so and to set up the capillary attraction between the compost and the soil if it's a container grown tree, so that it then will be able to draw water up out of the soil. Depending on how dry the soil is when you plant, at least 1 bucketful, maybe even 2 or 3. Having planted it, watered it in thoroughly, there is then probably very little, certainly in the winter, when you're getting regular rainfall, you probably won't need to water the tree again until it gets hot and dry in the summer. With a container grown tree, it's much more important to keep some water going on fairly regularly, not necessarily every day, but a couple of times a week you'll need to give it a bucketful, because the root system is very constricted with a lot more top growth. Whereas a bare root tree, which planted when dormant, it actually has a chance, because the roots and the top are developing together, they will actually naturally develop in balance. The container grown tree, you've already got a lot of flowers and foliage on it with no roots into the soil, so it needs a bit more help. There we are. And once that's drained away, just move this back. If it ends up slightly mounded, as this is, then that's no bad thing. If we get a wet winter, you'll be holding the roots a little bit higher up out of the water and giving the tree a better chance to establish. What is critical is that this kink here, which is the original bud union, you must keep the soil level below that, because if this is buried, the tree itself will root into the soil, and then you will very quickly lose the dwarfing effect of the rootstock. It is important that the tree is reasonably still in the ground, and if after you've planted it you can see evidence of it rocking and you'll get a ring that appears, a ring of air around the base of the trunk, then you will need to do something to stabilise the tree so that the new roots can actually grow into the soil. They're very brittle when they first start to grow, and if the tree is able to rock, then the new roots will just break off and the tree won't establish. So if you need to add a stake, with a container grown tree such as the one we just planted here, you don't want to drive the stake straight down through the root system. So put it in as an angle, which I'm not actually going to do here because we don't need to stake this one. But if you hammer the stake carefully in against a convenient point of the trunk, so tap this in with a mallet, which I am not going to do, as I said. Get it down to about here, and then taking the tree tie, you first of all put the ribbed bit around the trunk of the tree. That allows for room for growth. Then you tuck the tail through the first slot like that, get that level with the trunk, turn it round so that you've got it against the stake, and the crossover then acts as a spacer. You then just take the tail round the trunk, pop it through the other slot and pull it tight, and you see you've got as tight as it will reasonably go to about like that, and there we are, one staked tree. Just get them level there. These are made of a fairly stiff rubber, so they will actually stretch, which means that you've got room for growth. Check the tie, I don't know, once or twice a year, and slacken it off as the tree grows. But this isn't going to need to be in place for more than about a growing season. It should then be thoroughly established. You can remove the stake and the tree will just grow away perfectly stable.